away, and I'm sure people who will be able to join in will be able to catch up and ask questions as we go. Firstly, thanks to everyone for dialing in tonight for the session. We ran one earlier this afternoon, and really it's just a bit of a refresher course to go through a few new things that have come up and just touch base and answer any questions. So my name's Darren Anderson. I'm the competitions manager at Cricket Victoria. I've also got Paul Milo, who's head of member services, on the line, and a couple of other CV staff who'll be assisting with answering any queries that come up as we go through. And then as we lead into round one this weekend, I know it's been a long wait for many clubs, and there's been a fair bit go on with a number of different COVID webinars and a lot of information coming out about how we go about getting back to playing cricket. So we thought it was a real timely reminder just to have a quick session where clubs can jump on, get the information they need, and ask any questions that may have answers that they need to know before the weekend. So realistically, we're going to be sharing learnings that we received from regional Victoria as they've been experiencing a fair bit with their training and matches over the last few weeks as they've returned to play, as well as the updates we've received from government on restrictions, and then any key areas that we think clubs should be focusing on this week and over the weekend, and then as we go through the next few weeks. So please make sure you're asking any questions in the chat function. We want to make this as engaging as possible and make sure that you walk away from this having everything answered that you want. Like to acknowledge country before we get going. So while we're meeting online today and across various locations, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the various lands from which we're joining and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. For housekeeping, we just ask everyone remains on mute during the session and keeps their videos off just to help with connectivity. Questions are encouraged, so whack them in the chat function, and we will be recording this session so that you can come back and visit any information that you might miss, but we'll also be posting it on the Cricket Victoria website so other people can jump on and have a bit of a look. So tonight we'll go through a bit of a roadmap for where we are in terms of returning for community cricket, provide some resources and where you can access them, answer the pre-submitted questions that were sent through, and then focus on the key learning areas that are on the screen. And then finally, we'll answer any other questions that might come up throughout the session. Jumping into the Cricket Victoria COVID resources, there's been a fair bit of work that's gone into this over the last few months as the information's come in. Basically, what we've done is on the main page of cricketvictoria.com.au, we've included that white box in the top right, and it allows you to click the blue button and it goes straight through to the resources page. Here you'll be able to find a heap of information that you need, including frequently asked questions with over 50 questions in there that we've come up throughout various webinars and emails and phone calls over the last few months. It's also got all the recordings for the previous webinars that we've run, a link to the Return to Cricket site where you can purchase sanitizer and signage. But then as you scroll down on that page, you'll be able to find a number of different downloads. It's where the Return to Train and Play plan is. It's where the training guides are, the playing guides, all the commitment documents, the roadmap, and then other useful downloads that clubs can use and edit to display around their facilities to make sure that everyone's aware of what they need to be doing. So please make sure you jump on and check out that website. The roadmap has been updated on the resources section. So as we can now see, Metro's joined regional Victoria at step 3, and we've provided a little bit more background and information to that as the state government announced on Sunday and the previous announcements 2 weeks before. You'll see that there's a fair bit of info there in the final step, which we're expecting to be able to move towards on the 23rd of November. And you'll see that it means that the group sizes will more than likely increase for training. It means that potential for indoor training in indoor cricket centres for more people to be able to participate, and then we can start getting back towards a bit of normality in terms of social group sizes and being able to really have that social revenue coming in, which clubs will really need throughout this year and at the back end of this year. So jump on there, make sure you have a read of what's included in the steps at the moment in step 3, but then what we're more than likely going to experience in the final step in COVID normal in the next few weeks once we do get to that stage. We had a number of pre-submitted questions come in during the registration form, so we thought we'd touch off on them straight off the bat, so that way it answered anyone's queries throughout the session. So first of all, one of the questions came in, what can be sold from a canteen, and will Cricket Victoria assist clubs with the hospitality restrictions? Canteens can operate as normal, similar to what we see with takeaway from cafes and coffee shops, so there's no restriction for what can be served. However, in the Cricket Victoria COVID plans, there's numerous links for clubs to visit to ensure that they're operating within the guidelines for hospitality. A few of the key ones being the density quotients, so 1 person per 4 square metres, and also the cleaning requirements. So we encourage clubs to make sure they're aware of their social spaces and the spaces that they're using, and know what the maximum capacity for that 1 to 4 square metres is, so that you're not having too many people in an area. Another question was, can clubs run a barbecue after training? Our recommendation is that for at least the next fortnight to hold off on running any barbecue or after training meals. Our advice is get in, train and get out, and we need to make sure we take baby steps over the next few weeks until the further restrictions are eased and we can start returning to a little bit of normality. Who supplies the afternoon tea and drinks? Associations will ultimately set their own rules, but the recommendation is for all competitions that all players and umpires must supply their own afternoon tea, and there's to be no communal afternoon tea at all this season, and that the players and umpires should be bringing their own drink bottles with their names on them for the drinks breaks. This is the structure that we'll be putting in place for Premier Cricket this season. It's what we're recommending for community cricket as well. Can clubs who have booth liquor licences operate as usual under the current restrictions? For those of you who are unaware, a booth license allows a club to sell alcohol from a designated place other than the bar, and it's for the duration of the match plus 30 minutes afterwards only. So the answer to this is yes, they can operate as usual, providing you receive the local council approval to do so. And we really recommend clubs jump on and make sure they're aware of what they can and can't do, what kind of license they have, and what their red line is, so that they're not breaking the licensing rules. Clubs are requesting access to social facilities. Are we encouraging socialising and access to bars after training and matches? So access to these facilities, as we mentioned, is dependent on the local council. We encourage clubs to follow the get in, train or play and get out practices. However, there is a social element to the sport. So if players from both teams share a drink after the match, this should be kept to an absolute minimum. We don't want clubs operating for extended periods after the match. This can take place later in the year as restrictions ease and we do return to normal. Can coaches participate at training? Yes, coaches can participate at training. Basically, the way we describe it is coaches can provide instruction to players at training, like showing them techniques of batting and bowling, and they would not be included in the group sizes. However, if a coach was to take part in the activities like bowling in the nets, playing the warm-up games, participating in fielding drills, they would then be included in the group sizes. So that's just something to be aware of. It's not saying they can't do it, it's just knowing what they are doing and whether or not they do or do not get included in those group sizes by what they're doing. We've allowed a fair bit of time at the back end of this meeting for any other questions that might come up. And then if you've got other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat function and we'll answer them as we go.
I might, thanks, Darren. I'll kick in now just so you've got a different voice. We ran a session earlier today. It went for around about half an hour or so, so it might be a little bit of an earlier night. But as Darren said, make sure you ask the questions. It's a relatively small group, which is great. So we can sort of really be personal to your specific needs. But these are just some of the things that we've learnt along the way. We'll touch on a little bit about the preparation and match day as well. But from regional Victoria, matches are taking a little bit longer, some cases quite a bit longer if they're dawdling through. So just having a chat to captains, having a chat to umpires to try and keep the game moving along. Most associations would have either decided on things like 5 overs from one end or not, but certainly those that have still got that flexibility, we'd encourage that. There certainly are some competitions that are going down that path at least till Christmas, and just to then reassess after that. But certainly the sanitizer breaks. If the ball is touched by someone other than a player, it needs to be wiped down. So it is taking a little bit longer. But the sanitizer being brought onto the field is another bit of a time saver. Some of the clubs have been finding that they've just been leaving it in players' bags. They're going off, they're finding their individual bags, might be in the car, and it's just taking a fairly lengthy break. Some of those that we've heard of that have been, and obviously it'll be up to individual associations depending on what their rules are. But if you've actually got a situation where there's a couple of bottles and it might be 2 players running out, so one to a group of 5, one to another group of 5, squirt into those hands, they run back to their position. So we also think that the breaks will be over time. From 10 overs, it will certainly move over coming weeks, and certainly we would expect this side of Christmas to potentially every 15 or 20. But to start with, it's every 10 overs until we get a little bit deeper into the season. Face masks is another one where players have either felt that because they're playing, they don't need to wear a mask. That's only the case whilst they're batting, bowling and fielding. So if they're waiting around and they're basically sitting there watching, waiting to bat, already batted and dismissed, they need to wear a face mask. Umpires has been one that we've continued to work with the state government on. The current state government ruling is that umpires, by and large, are standing there predominantly. So we've certainly gone into to ask the question of the state government. They've been very specific on that at the moment. We think that there may be some relaxing of that in coming weeks from the state government, and we keep asking the question. So that's all the way up to the Chief Health Officer and Sports Minister. Those conversations are being had. We'll continue to update as we go. Communication is critical there. One of the things that's working well is where clubs, in advance of the match day, just reach out to the opposition club. We know some big clubs, there'll be a lot of teams there, so maybe it's the reliance on the coach or the team manager, just to give the opposition a call. Where do we park? Where's the QR codes going to be? What are the sort of protocols we need to be aware of? Is the canteen going to be open for our players to put their drinks and any food in? Having those sort of conversations in advance just takes a little bit of the anxiety before the actual day. Probably another one that we've found that particularly in region of Victoria, once they've got their first session or 2 underway, region of Victoria COVID numbers have been better than Melbourne. So they've probably been where we are now, seeing some great COVID numbers. They were there a few weeks ago. So they've said, look, after a couple of weeks, we had to really think about it to avoid just going into old traditional non-COVID habits. And I guess it's really, really important that we don't let complacency creep in. There's no cases in Victoria. So if there is any case, and it does come back to link back to the local cricket club, that's going to be the lead story on the news, the XYZ Cricket Club cluster. And we don't want to be the next, Cedar Meats or Butchers Club as the cause for the breakout. So really doing everything we possibly can to try and adhere to the protocols. But cricket is being played all over Australia. It's being played in regional Victoria, so in the same sort of landscape that we're operating in. It was played over in England during their, I guess, parts of their heavy part of their pandemic. So it certainly is possible for it to occur, but there just is some of those core protocols. We'll touch a little bit now on the preparation and then match day as well. So I might hand it back to you, Darren, for the next slide.
No worries. Thanks, Paul. So, as Paul mentioned, we really urge clubs to make sure they touch base with their opposition in the lead up to match day. So at least that way, if your players are away, they know what to expect when they get to the opposition's ground. We've heard comments today at the previous session that a few councils aren't allowing access yet to facilities. So it'd be good for your players to know that if that's the case, that they're going to a ground with no access to facilities, so they can at least arrive ready to go, or be prepared for what they're walking into. So we do really recommend that. Ensure your teams are selected in My Cricket. This is a really important one. So that way, prior to match day, they're in the system. You don't need to worry about the team nominations because you can't hand over team sheets at the toss. You don't need to worry about scribbling players' names into scorebooks and then them not being in batting order. So if they're in My Cricket beforehand, everything's done, and it also means that the opposition or yourselves could potentially live score if you've got the My Cricket Live Score app. So that's a really important one. Make sure you've actually purchased your sanitizer and signs ready to go. And then the attendance register's been set up and it's going to be available for people to check in. So we'll touch on it in a second, but it's going to be the home club's responsibility for the sanitizer, but each team's responsibility to bring their own wipes for the ball. And then also set up a designated check-in area for players, coaches, umpires and volunteers to go to before accessing the facility. That way everyone knows where they need to go, they check in, and then they can get on with their warm-ups and pre-match preparation.
So that's the preparation in advance of match day, and then these are probably the 5 key tips for match day. We'll share in the link for those that haven't seen it. We shared it at the start. It's on our last slide as well. The COVID resources that are on our website. So we have one-page guides about the match day protocols. We've got double-sided sheets, so two pages on managing sweat and saliva and those sort of things. But actually getting to the day, signage being clearly displayed. So as Darren said, having the signage that can be downloaded for free, some of the general signage around, and also the other QR codes up as well. So arriving a little bit earlier than normal. We know I've been a team manager at a local club. You've got to arrive early, set up all the cones, do all the get the stumps set up, and getting the scorers table set up, and all those sort of things. It's just another job there of putting making sure the signage is up. Making sure that everyone does check in when accessing the facility. So one of the things there, it's not to go around and chase up the person walking past that has a bit of a passing interest, that's walking the dog on the other side of the ground, or even a couple of people that don't go near any other players and just stay well out of the way of anyone else. So you don't have to sort of scout around the whole neighbourhood getting everyone to check in. But those that are around the players and those that need to be there, those that are coming up, checking the score, buying something from the canteen. It does take sort of 10 seconds or so to put the name and contact in, and it will help them as much as it'll help the club as well to identify everyone that was there. Because it could be that there is a COVID case. They would like to know about that, and they'd like to know about it straight away so they can isolate. Spectators is an interesting one. They're not to be encouraged just yet, and that's probably only for the next couple of weeks, but the state government are really sort of keen to get sport started, but concentrating on the people that need to be there. So players, umpires, scorers, team managers, coaches, everyone who needs to be part of the game. If someone is behind the canteen, not a problem at all, but just the sort of the people that aren't actively involved in the game. And again, it's only for the next couple of weeks or so. Once we move to the next step in the stage, there's certainly a bit more acceptance from the state government of, yes, absolutely, we want to then encourage spectators. So they certainly are allowed to be in a public park. That's okay, subject to 1.5 distance and subject to not being in a group of more than 10 at the moment, those sort of things. But yeah, it's just not to try and encourage it. Concentrating on the game, the match, getting those things right, and then taking the next step in a couple of weeks once the protocols are right, to then ask more people to come along. Face masks are, again, to be worn at all times unless on the field. So that, again, may change. We've seen the Chief Health Officer and Premier make some comments about face masks and being more of an issue or more required for indoor or high risk. We would certainly think that cricket would be at the low risk, and obviously from an outdoor perspective, low risk as well. So fingers crossed that might change in the next couple of weeks.
What we'll do now is we'll jump into facilities, and then we can come back and answer some questions at the back end. So again, as we've mentioned, accessing your facilities is going to be local council dependent, and they need to provide approval. We know of some councils that have already done so, and we know of some councils that have said no. So make sure you're in touch with your council so you know what you've got available to yourselves this weekend. We're recommending, or the guidelines are that change rooms can be open. However, we recommend their use is kept to a minimum. So that means player kit storage, a place for them to get changed as opposed to being out in the open, being able to access toilets. However, we really recommend no showers are used because that adds to the cleaning and all the requirements for clubs to do. So it's really just a place for storing some things that's a little bit more secure than being out in the open. Canteens can be open. We also recommend limiting all access to social rooms until further restrictions are eased. So if your social rooms are there to provide access to toilets for people that might be around, well then so be it. But we don't want clubs opening them up for functions and get-togethers. And then really post-match, cricket's a social sport. So we understand part of the game is to have a convivial with the opposition and the umpires after a match. But we ask that if this is to be done, it's kept to a minimum. Clubs shouldn't be opening themselves up for extended periods. It opens themselves up to risk. We're saying get in, play, get out. There'll be a time for more socialising later in the year, provided we all do the right thing. I'll throw over to Paul.
Thanks for that, Darren. This is the last slide we have for the night. I've just seen a question that's probably going to be easier for me to answer it rather than type it, but Stuart's asked a question, can players go for a walk around the ground, leave the players' area, so to speak? Yeah, absolutely. So that's fine. One of the things we're having in place at Premier Cricket is once they get to the ground, not to leave the ground, so not go down to the local milk bar to buy something at the tea break, that sort of stuff, just again to try and limit the exposure. We know there's no cases in Victoria, but yeah, certainly that's something we're looking to put in place. But go for a walk around the ground, absolutely. You know, that's important if you've made a duck and you've got to clear your head to do a lap of the oval. Those sort of things is yeah, certainly fine. So again, the last slide here is just we know that training's underway. We've seen right across Victoria, you get learnings from every training session, and that's fine. That's not a problem at all. But just a couple of the key things to keep in mind: group sizes remain at the usual team number, and there's been an increase to the amount of teams that can train at the ground. So that's in the last sort of week or so. It's increased to having a 10-metre gap at all times between groups, which you're going to want to have anyway with balls flying around out on the oval. So we're sort of saying no more than 6 groups. Some won't use all 6 parts of the oval, but no more than 6 groups on the oval. For nets, if you've got enough nets to have a 10-metre gap, you can have multiple teams training. In about 11 days' time, it's likely that group size is going to increase to 50. So we sent out an update on Monday for clubs to consider, start to think about whether or not you'll just go effectively back to normal. Everyone just trains in the nets or trains on the oval or however you normally do it, or you actually want to keep the group separated. The benefits of keeping the group separated is that if someone gets COVID from that group, they don't share it to the entire club. It might be that you've got a small group, potentially one team needs to isolate for 14 days. That'll be a decision of the DHHS rather than the entire playing list. So it's just an option for clubs to think about. And particularly the next couple of weeks, limiting the access to the change rooms and social rooms. They can be fully open, subject to council approval. Showers can be used if required, but we would say you don't need to at the moment have a shower at training, and you then have to clean, make sure that's cleaned, you know, before and after, and so the more that's opened up, the more that needs to be cleaned, and we know that the virus does spread more readily indoors than outdoors. So limiting the change rooms, but again, subject to council approval. Canteens and kiosks can be open subject to council approval as well. And from a training perspective, particularly again the next couple of weeks, as Darren said earlier, just focusing on getting in, training, getting out at the moment, preparing players to play. As we then get through the next couple of weeks, there'll be more time for post-match or post-training. Might be selection dinners or and those sort of things, or just going in and having a couple of soft drinks or drinks after training or matches. So with each week that goes by, there'll be more and more that can be done there. There's a question that's just come in there in relation to 3 pitches in nets. Can we have 2 groups training in each end? net while keeping the middle net empty. We're not allowing this at the moment, but so in terms of the one net, it's probably measuring it out. Some of them are bigger than others. But it's 10 metres is the gap at the moment. We were hoping to try and get it officially as a one net gap, but we're now 11 days away from potentially that going to a group of 50. So anywhere where you can keep groups separated by 10 metres, go for it.
Yeah. I might, Paul, I've got Sarah, she's got her hand up and she's asked a couple of questions, and it might be easier for her to come off of mute to ask the question just around the sanitizer and the sign. So, Sarah, if you want to take yourself off mute and ask the question, go ahead.
Oh, thank you for that. I was just thinking, just listening to all of these things, obviously, we've come a long way from when we started with the Cricket Victoria guidelines. I've been communicating it to my club for the entire time, and now, like 3 days out, we're getting different messages. I spent a lot of time saying you can't share equipment, you can't go in the change rooms, and now all of a sudden it's all changing. I mean, and it's so hard to keep up. It's so hard to actually give a consistent message, and the cleaning implications are huge. Nobody really wants to do it at my club. I certainly can't clean all of our 6 grounds every single time after the matches and the training. So it's like, in a way, it's great that everything's moving towards COVID normal. But, it's a constantly moving goalpost. And we start games in 2 days' time. It's really hard to know what's going on.
Darren, I'll answer that. I know you've got a 7 o'clock meeting, so if you need to duck off to that one, I can certainly answer that. But Sarah, look, and if things didn't change, that would have made Darren and my life a lot easier over the last couple of months as well. Everyone has been challenged by it. We've been meeting with Sport and Rec Victoria. Some individual things, as we've moved up the restrictions and then down the restrictions, have changed constantly. And I think the point that we're now at a stage where we're at 0 cases is a great result, and it means that more can be opened up. So things like the equipment sharing, that was something that was put in place. We worked closely with Cricket Australia, we worked closely with the state government. Once the protocols, they could see the protocols were in place, they were able to make that possible by ensuring there were cleaning. So that certainly saved a lot of families a significant amount of money and is a better position than what it was, but it has changed. We've been dealing broadly speaking, in about 6 different scenarios in Victoria, whether or not competitions are just metro, just regional, if they cross metro to regional because of the Ring of Steel, if they're mostly country and they'd started but metro clubs couldn't start. So there was about 6 different rules, and a lot of things kept changing as they went. So we definitely agree that it's been a challenge. It's been frustrating for everyone. We're fortunate from a timing point of view. The winter codes didn't really get started at all, and we're in a position now where we can start. So certainly things like you can only have 2 groups. That was a week or so ago. Now it's 6 groups. Now in another week it'll be 50 that can train together. So that's making it easier, but certainly a challenge to keep up with. So we've been doing weekly updates, and there's been changes every week for the last couple of months. So certainly it's a challenge. We also agree that the cleaning of the change rooms is a challenge, and which is why the advice has been, if you don't need to open it up, don't open it up. I've been involved at a local club where you'd go weeks and weeks and weeks and not use a change room at a junior level. And a lot of games are like that. A lot of grounds in regional Victoria, they might not have a pavilion at all, or they can't get access for different reasons. And that obviously saves time and effort, especially now we're not in the hottest part of summer as well. And there is shade options around. So it's great that we are getting back to normality, as I think the other Sarah has put into the note in the side. But it's been challenging, and my hat goes off to all the clubs out there, the volunteers at the 1,000+ clubs throughout Victoria that have had to try and understand it all and the changing nature of those protocols. So we don't shy away from the fact that it's been complex and changing, and we've tried to keep everyone as up to date as we could.
Yeah, and just jumping in, we've got to be mindful that things are moving forward, but we need to make sure that we're still doing the right things, and that's why we're asking people to take baby steps if you are going to be opening up and doing various things, because it's going to be a lot harder to pull it back in if we do need to go back to pretty heavy restrictions around access to facilities and all that. So it's just making sure that you're doing the right thing by your club. Whilst some clubs might want to open because they need to, it doesn't necessarily mean that your club needs to do the full open, and you just work to what you can do and what your volunteers are. Because Sarah, I can 100% understand where you're coming from, that there's a lot of people that want to play, but there are not as many that want to put up their hand to help out and do that. And if your club only has a capacity with volunteers to do a certain thing, well, then that's all it is. And then the players and the rest of the club need to understand that if they want to get more access, well, then they need to put up their hand and assist with a fair bit of the hard work.
Spot on. Absolutely. Yeah, sorry, Sarah, jump in.
Yeah, no, not many people put up their hands, but a lot of people expect you to jump through hoops and be the cleaning lady or the washerwoman. I mean, we've only just got our teams have only just come out. Our junior team managers have only just been appointed. We're trying to orientate them all in the basics up from scratch. And so to be changing things, like I've been fielding questions, can we have chairs? Can we have tables? What do we do? Can we share equipment? It needs to be simple to be enforceable. And they're all trying to do it by themselves on Friday and Saturday. I've got 18 junior teams. I cannot be at every ground to orient them. We've done online things. We've emailed them so many times. I don't think they know whether they're coming or going. It's kind of, everyone's in a spiral. It's kind of, the season suddenly started and we've got all these extra things going on. And, I think I'm just going to try and keep us to stick to the exact things we've told them already, because if you change it, then everyone's just confused.
Yeah, look, it's a great idea. I mean, making it as easy as you can. Whilst there might be some clubs that take a little bit of extra liberties, and the changes really have only been about training recently in terms of the increases. The match day protocols haven't really changed. So some of the things that we're talking about may come into play where we don't have to sanitize as often, or umpires might not have to wear a mask. So they're things that are coming down. But the planning for match day hasn't really changed. But certainly the number of people that can train together, and it is a positive. But I do appreciate that it's changed. But is it more people can train together, and that makes it a little bit easier for larger clubs. I'm involved in a large club that has access to a few grounds and needs all of the grounds and all of the nets available all the time. And there was challenges about not getting access to school grounds for a while, and that got supported, so that helped. But there's definitely been some complexity. But the fact that you've taken the time to dial into this and really sort of work with all of your clubs is a credit. Don't panic if it's not perfect. We've seen premier clubs with people that are there on a part-time basis at the actual club get learnings from every session that they've held so far, and they've had several training sessions and practice matches. So the focus is still about people enjoying the game of cricket, but there are a few suggestions and a few protocols. Sanitizer breaks are new, QR codes are new. But broadly speaking, once the game gets underway, they'll be the sort of the core differences. Scorers keeping the 1.5 metres apart is new. All we can say is really try your best. There's not a sort of a magic wand that's going to make it easy.
Yeah, I think Stuart's got his hand up as well. So, Stuart, if you want to jump in and take yourself off mute. Yep.
Yeah, biggest question just in regards to, say, for our juniors, there's no pavilions around the grounds. So often pavilions become like a bit of a barrier, and you can maybe rope them off or do whatever. But juniors sort of out in on a big field, is there a requirement to sort of rope it off, or to maybe cone it off or something, just to try to stop people from just coming in and out? Is that a requirement? Or, I mean, I haven't read anything about it, but just sort of wondering how that looks.
So just double checking, you're talking about the pavilion, roping off the pavilion, or? Yeah,
we're going to rope off a pavilion. What if you don't have a pavilion? So how do you keep two junior teams sort of together and from other people sort of mingling in and all that sort of stuff as well?
Yeah, so broadly speaking, the 1.5 metres is the key there. Ideally, you've got the two teams that, and if they're separated by 10 metres, and you'll have one team out in the field, the other team waiting to bat, generally speaking. Parents will be sitting around the boundary line. Again, we're not necessarily saying you have to stop people from coming, but at the moment it's not encouraging spectators to be there the next couple of weeks, which actually helps to just focus on the players, the umpire, or the parents that are umpiring, the scorers, just to get the protocols right. So that'd help, but certainly you don't have to rope off areas. People are allowed to be in a public park. Members of the public that might not be connected to the club are allowed to walk their dog or walk past or walk around and see what's going on. So you don't have to police that sort of processes. But it's really about if you do see some people that are coming up without a mask that you might not know, maybe it's just asking them to move away from the players. If players aren't wearing their masks, it's reminding them that they need to when they're waiting. But so certainly you don't have to be the local law enforcement, and you don't have to rope off council areas and council facilities.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. No worries. Thanks.
I think that covers a lot of the questions that have come through, and it's been actually a really good conversation to be able to have. I suppose having a small group, it allows us to have this opportunity to raise your hand and actually ask the question, so you get the answers that you need. And I see Sarah's actually put her hand up. Sarah from Spotswood, I think it is.
Yeah, hi, how you going?
Good.
Good. I just in order to help, I know I'm one of those OCD organised people, but having run the construction industry through COVID, when those rules changed from morning to afternoon and took a week to learn to interpret, I just think the changes that have gone through cricket from the beginning to now have all been pretty common sense. And I just, from a construction and a football and now to a cricket background, in football you can't have a game without a trainer and a number of first aid people. So I just think what I've told my guys, right or wrong, is that you can't have a game unless you've got 2 COVID officers. And bang, bang, we had 2 COVID officers for every single team because everybody wants to play. So I think it's more, I just don't think people need to be worrying so much about, oh no, the rules changed. Just make it somebody else's responsibility for that one little team. And then it should all go really smoothly for everybody.
Yeah. Great call, Sarah. And just on that one, absolutely, ideally, if you've got a COVID officer from the home team, from the away team, we've sort of made the suggestion of reach out in advance of the day if you can. We know you won't have the contact details for every team in the opposition, but that does help. Technically, certainly it hasn't been written into the rules that a game cannot happen if you don't have the 2 official COVID officers there, but it's the best practice to have. So again, we didn't want to create a situation where games are not happening because the games are the priority, but obviously a COVID officer greatly helps. And that could be the scorer, that could be the coach if it needs to be, but someone who's going to be there just to keep an eye on the protocols, which again will ease as the season goes on, and that probably gets back to the other Sarah's point about the challenge of things changing, but things will ease, and that will make things easier as we get into pre-Christmas.
Unless there's aren't any other questions, I think that covers a lot of it. And as Paul mentioned, we don't envy the job of club volunteers this year. It's been a tough start, and no doubt as things change, we hope it'll get easier and we'll get a bit back to normality. But keeping on top of the changes and managing clubs and junior teams and all that, it's not going to be an easy year. And we do really appreciate you taking the time, to dial in tonight, but all the work that you're doing in the lead up to get cricket up and going at your club. And in any way that we can support as Cricket Victoria through to the volunteers and to the clubs, we'll look to do, and we'll try and make it as easy as possible. And we'll keep the communication streams open over the next few weeks and months as things change, so that everyone's on top of things and get an understanding for what needs to be done if there's any implications that affect clubs at either senior or junior level. But we do want to thank you for taking the time to join us tonight.
And we know this isn't the only 45 minutes you've put into this. You've put in hours and hours, and as it's been, we definitely appreciate the changing nature of it. So good luck for the weekend. Reach out, check out the FAQs on the website. It may just answer another question there. If not, reach out to your regional club officer, cricket manager, area manager if needed. But good luck for the weekend, and fingers crossed we get some good weather and get some matches underway.
Thanks all.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
G'day, Craig. Did you have a question there for Darren or I?